All right, so we're ready to draw our next card, and we already know what it is because of the event. We know it's a ceremony card, and we simply follow the instructions on this card from top to bottom. Step 1, conduct the enemy way effect on all ceremony cards in the player's hand. Right now we don't have any cards in our hand, so this isn't going to do anything. And then we reset the cubes. That's good for us, actually, because it throws all these cubes back into the raid pool, and that makes it increasingly unlikely the enemy will pull that third red cube on us. Now, regarding that enemy way effect, let me continue. It'll make sense in just a moment. Step 2 of the ceremony card says to discard the card that you just drew, or go on to step 3. So you don't have to do step 3 if you don't want to. But if you do step 3, you get to add a child population counter to Passage of Time box, which is good, and then you get to add this card to your hand. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing remains to be seen, because cards in your hand can be used in one of two ways. Each of these ceremony cards has a blessing way effect or an enemy way effect. Okay, so you see the blessing way effect allows you to discard this card in lieu of making a die roll during a battle, evasion, or any time during the player operations segment, and that die roll is automatically considered to be a 3. Now, each of these cards also has an enemy way effect. That means if you have this card in your hand and another ceremony card is drawn, then you do the enemy way effect of each ceremony card in your hand. You do not have a hand limit. But if you want to be like some of our playtesters that stuck like 8 cards in their hand, and then a ceremony card came up and absolutely decimated them. So be careful with it. And I've seen a lot of people, a lot of early players were taking these cards into hand, and they're not really reading what the enemy way effect is. So I highly recommend you look at those enemy way effects before you bring these cards into your hand, because they can be devastating. You can get a string of 3-4 ceremony cards in a row that can just cripple you. In this case, the ceremony effect on this card during the Spanish period is actually fairly benign. It places intruder counters on the map. And that doesn't really hurt you that much in the Spanish period, because most of the intruder counters are good things. Intruder counters are counters that go down in random areas, and they're revealed as soon as a family enters that area. They're also revealed if they land on top of a family when they're placed. And most of them are good. It could be firearms, it could be trade goods, it could be population to join your tribe. There's lots of good things in there. But then there's also bad things like ambushes and things like that, things that'll take away action points from you. There's also ones that'll place a mission outpost on your land. So some of these, are bad, but most of them are good. And early in the Spanish period, I don't think that would hurt us at all if that got triggered a couple times. In fact, that might be a quick way for us to get some guns. Mexican and American period, it's a totally different animal, because intruder counters have another effect during those periods of the game. Namely, they increase the amount of action points that the enemy acquires during their operation segment. So during the American and Mexican periods, you really don't want this thing to trigger, because those intruder counters can start to become a problem. So we'll go ahead and we'll add this to our hand. And let's see, in Vassal, I think I have a hand window. I'll just stick it up in the air. And I'll get to add a child counter to Passage of Time, so it's not all that bad. We'll be able to hopefully get a new family going here real soon. Okay, so here's what we've got. Our next card is an operations card. We desperately need food before we can really do much of anything Passage of Time related. If we did a Passage of Time right now, we would not be able to feed anyone, because we have no corn and we have no sheep. And I blew off all of our all of our action points. So it's worthwhile to take actions here in Raid New Mexico, but we don't have any APs to preempt, so the enemy will go first. And they're going to collect 4 APs per the card, and then 2 more for the Subjugation of New Mexico box. We roll 2 dice. And they roll boxcars, which flip-flops these two instructions. We talked about that earlier. When you roll when you roll doubles, instead of flipping counters, then the two counters adjacent to the die roll symbol on the enemy instruction display swap places. I should also mention they only swap places if there is a counter in each space. It is theoretically possible to have an empty space on one of those during the hang on a second here. Okay, it is possible to have an empty space in the active column during when you have a peace counter or a defend instruction that's in play. It's kind of one of these special cases that can happen. So the rules specifically state that you only swap places if there's a counter in each space where the swap takes place. Sorry, Mike, you were distracting me there. What's going on?
I'm sorry. I thought you didn't move the raid counter, but I was incorrect.
Okay, all right. Well, I was trying to figure out what you were doing and talking at the same time. I missed it. Okay, so here we go. Topmost instruction is a build. And what this does, let's look over at our shortcut here, our summary, because I want to make sure I get this right. Build. Spend APs per instruction counter. If all outpost counters from the current period are in play, you'll treat it as subvert. Otherwise, place one outpost in area number 1 of territory with the lowest die roll symbol that does not already contain an outpost counter. Of the same type is what the rules go on to say. But in this case, what that essentially means is they spend 3 APs to build a mission in area number 1 of Shiprock. And the reason they do it in Shiprock is because Shiprock does not already contain a mission, and Shiprock has the lowest die roll symbol. If there was already a mission in Shiprock, then this instruction would have built one in San Juan Valley because that has a die roll face of 2, and so forth. The very last place that one of these would be built would be Black Mesa. And if they're building missions in Black Mesa, you're in trouble. All right, so 3 APs spent, instruction counter slides right. Now we go to subvert. Now we've already encountered this one before, and it says that because we don't have 3 red cubes in the subjugation box, we're going to treat this as though it is a subjugation instruction. So they're going to pull 3 cubes, and none of them are red. So our luck is holding there. Plus, that had the added advantage of pulling that green cube out of there, which makes it a little bit more helpful for us because we need to raid to steal some sheep. All right, they are out of APs, and so we reset the display. And now it is going to be our turn, and we desperately need to take actions. We know we can activate 3 families because we have 3 elders in display, so we'll just go ahead and do that. We'll start with family A, and they're going to plant corn in Shiprock. So let's go ahead and pull a corn counter out. Oh, I got to do it from the counter. Here we go. Forgot how my vassal module works. Okay, that's going to cost them... Wait a minute. I don't think I can do that. Never mind. Curses. Curses and imprecations. I forgot. Family A doesn't have all its family members and no horse. It's not going to be able to plant corn there because it costs 4 movement points above the AP or above the value of the area. And Family A is down to their last population counter. They only have 4 movement points. They're not going to be able to do diddly. So what we'll do with Family A instead is this. We're going to do Tribal Council. And how this guy works is... Just a second here. Get to the right screen here. Take action summary. There we go. All right, Tribal Council. You spend all your MPs, all your movement points, and the family must not have spent any prior. You roll a die, and if the die roll is greater than the family's current area, you collect an action point. So if we roll 4 or better, we get an AP out of this. Okay, that family's just cursed or something. Okay, it's just not happening there. All right, Family C. We can do this. We can totally do this. We can totally plant corn with them. All right, they're going to get 6 movement points. They got all their peoples. They're going to spend 1 to move into Hopi Land Area 1. they will spend the next 5 to plant corn in Hopi Land Area 1. So that corn counter I drew, I stuck him over there. Last guy up, Family B is going to do what's called a long-range raid. Long-range raid allows you to raid Santa Fe from anywhere on the map, but you have to spend all your movement points to do so, and you can't have spent any prior to taking that action. So his Frosty goes, well, let's draw the cube first. And we drew a horse. That's good. Got a horse out of that. We really wanted... I don't know how I got an extra horse counter, but there it is. Okay. So we have 1 horse counter in there. I really was hoping for sheep, but I can deal with that. And then his Frosty goes up to 1 because he raided New Mexico and stole things. Everybody's activated, so we're done. Now, one of the reasons why I had to move Family C is even if I had the movement points to plant corn in Area 3 of the Zuni Mountains has a drought counter in it. And the major event says remove all corn counters from territories with at least 1 drought counter. So that wouldn't have made sense to plant any corn in the Zuni Mountains. So the event does nothing. Next we go to the minor event, which says roll to see which instructions swap places. We roll a 6, which swaps those 2 instructions right back. Unbelievable. Okay. And that terminates that card. The next card is going to be the ceremony card, and so we will conduct the enemy effect on all ceremony cards in player's hand. Okay, so we look at our hand here, and we've got this guy in our hand. So what I'm going to do is look at the enemy way effect. It says place 2 intruder counters. Roll a die to determine the territory. So we roll a 1, which is what the die roller seems to be stuck on, is 1s and 6s. And then we roll again to see which area of Shiprock, and we roll a 4. So we are going to place a random intruder counter in area 4 of Shiprock. Does that make sense to everybody? You roll once to define the area, and then again to determine which area. And again, you always use the unparenthesized value unless specifically told to do otherwise. Okay, it said to place 2 of these, so we're going to do this again. This time, we're going to place it in Black Mesa and Area 6 of Black Mesa. Yeah. So I got to run all the way back there to figure out what that is. Lovely. All right, well, I wasn't really hoping for that at all. Okay, and that card remains in our hand. Now, at the end of the enemy way effect, it says you can discard the card. So if it did something really terrible to you and you didn't want that to ever happen again, you could discard the card, but you lose the population counter that that card initially gave you by putting it into your hand. We'll keep it in our hand for now. Back to the card that we are resolving, and now this one, the enemy way effect, is a little bit more, yeah, I don't want to mess with that. So I'm just going to discard this card and not add it to my hand. Next card comes up, and it is an operations card. Enemy will go first since we do not have enough APs to preempt. They will collect 3, 4, 5. Oh, wait, we forgot to reset the cubes from the ceremony card. Sorry, my bad. I'm going too fast again. So these go back to the raid pool. These come over here. All right. So they're going to get a total of 3 action points from the card and then 2 more for New Mexico, the red cubes. So total 5. Roll twice to see which counter swap places, and 6 will flip over. And 2 does not because it's got a red stripe. All right, they execute the topmost instruction. It is a 2-point subjugate. And no red cube. They spend 1 more to do the next topmost subjugate instruction. And they pull out a green again. All right, so we can get away with this. They have 2 APs left, but the next topmost instruction costs 3, so they will not execute that. And we live to fight another day. All right, now I'm in a bit of a conundrum because I know a history card is coming up very soon now. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're a little over, we're just passing halfway through this first segment of the deck. At this point, I mean, it's getting increasingly likely we'll encounter a history card, but I still don't have enough. It's likely I'm not going to have enough food to feed my families. So I really need to get some sheep. And the only way to do that is to raid, and I only have really 2 families I can do this with. So I'm going to go ahead and risk hoping that I have one more operations card before the history card comes up, so I can do a passage of time and before the history card. And I'm going to do another action segment with our families. I'm going to use family A to try to gain an action point. And she does. Good for her. Well, you know what? Check that. Hang on a second. She's got 4 movement points. Family A. I think it makes more sense actually to march over here instead of doing tribal council and try to flip this over and see what we got. So I think that makes more sense. So let's do that. That'll show you what intruders do. And this is the best thing we could have found right there. Unbelievable. Aside from firearms, this is the best thing I could have hoped for. Skinwalkers are awesome. Here's what they do. If you have any action points stowed up, you lose them all. That's bad. But if you have 0 action points like us, then you gain action points equal to the number of elders that you have. I explained the phenomenon on a recent podcast. What this represents is a superstition in shape-shifting witches or shaman. And how it works is apparently a person puts on an animal skin and they take on the form of that animal, kind of like Beorn in The Hobbit. Okay, so if and Navajos are deathly terrified of skinwalkers. They don't really like to talk about them a whole lot. It's kind of a scary thing. Something you use to keep your kids disciplined. You scare them with these stories. So whenever you pull on these counters and you lose all your action points, what that's representing is a rumor of skinwalkers terrifying a community. When you pull this counter and you gain action points, what that represents is the elders disproving that there is a skinwalker in the vicinity and thus encouraging the people. So in this case here, we're going to get 3 APs, which is better than our die roll would have given us by far. And then this counter goes back into the draw cup. She's out of APs, so family A is done. Family B will do a long-range raid. Please, we need a white or a black cube. And we drew a white one. Perfect. Yay! Alright, so we gained a sheep counter, and his ferocity goes up 1, and he's out of movement points. Alright, and family C, I don't want to leave his area because he planted corn, but we could harvest it. In fact, but let's not. Let's do another long-range raid. I'm feeling lucky now. Let's see what we get here. Long-range raid, and it is black. Perfect. So we're going to use that to gain another sheep. Horses would be great, but I need to be able to feed our people, and we need sheep for that. So he is Frosty increases, and now we just really need to hope that the next card is not a history card. We need another operations. Yeah, Mike makes a good point. Let me explain. The black cubes are wild cards. They can be either sheep or horses, and it's up to you what you want to pull out of there. Either sheep or horses. And in this case, it was my choice. Normally, I would take horses, but right now feeding my people is a bit of a concern, so I chose the sheep instead. Black cubes are also much more powerful when you try to destroy an outpost by raiding it. They inflict 2 hits on them rather than 1 hit, like the brown, yellow, white cubes will. Alrighty, here we go. Major event. Hostile tribes. Instruction counters on enemy instruction display with star flip over to the front side. Okay, they all are flipped over to the front side. Then, if on the active column, swap places with a counter above it if possible. Next, if on standby, they swap places onto the active row. Right now, the only counter on enemy instruction display with a star is in the standby column, so it's going to swap places sideways. So the Comanche are... Rumors have reached our ears of Comanches possibly raiding us. And yeah, those
No.
cubes should have gone into the rated cubes box. I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking there. Yeah, they should go in there, obviously. I promise you, I really do know how to play my own game. All right, so major event is done. Minor event is roll to see which territory recovers from drought. We want a 3. We roll a 2. That doesn't help us. 2 has no drought. San Juan Valley has no drought. That's the one with the die roll face of 2. And there's no drought in the adjoining territories of Monument Valley and Shiprock. So no luck there. Now there's twice as many drought minor events in the deck than there is drought recovery. So if you start pulling out lots of drought recovery early on, you know that it's going to be a dry game later on. Whoopsie, I meant to flip that over. Drat. This is not what I wanted to see. Okay, well, here we go. The Pueblo Revolt. This is the card I really, really didn't want to see. I wanted to get a passage of time operation in beforehand because, yeah, this is just going to do a lot of things, none of them good to us. Okay, first of all, we return all cubes in recovery, raided cubes, and subjugation in New Mexico box to the raid pool. What this represents is a massive uprising by the Pueblo tribes of the Rio Grande. So all those go back into the raid pool. Only steps 2 and 4 of the enemy instruction segment, the enemy operations segment, are executed while this event is in play. What that means is the enemy will collect action points, and they will collect a bonus +1 action point from this event while this event is in play. And they will only use them, the action points they gained, to pull cubes out of the rated cubes box. In other words, to do a subjugate instruction. For all intents and purposes, we ignore the counters on the enemy instruction display. During step 4, all APs and enemy APs available box must be spent to execute subjugate instruction. If the number of APs spent exceeds the number of cubes in the raid pool, the excess APs spent have no effect. You ignore all enemy instruction counters while in play. For all purposes, you ignore them. You treat them as though they're not even in existence. And thirdly, you do not reset cubes while in play. So what this event means is it is inevitable that 3 red cubes will eventually come out of the pool, and that will subjugate the Pueblo tribes. It will cause all of the counters that have the red stripe on the enemy instruction display to flip over permanently, and the enemy will gain 1 morale. Okay, after you've done the major event, which is what we just did, we have to do a victory check segment or use good medicine. This is one of those cases where I am really tempted to use good medicine, just because this could be so debilitating. What do you think, Mike? Would you do good medicine with this one?
You should probably use it, but you probably should do the victory check to show people how it works.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do here. But if I'm playing the game, I would probably do good medicine here. So let me explain what good medicine does. It's something that's going to hurt you down the road, but it'll keep you from encountering an absolute catastrophe in a victory check segment. And to understand what I mean by catastrophe, you'll see in just a moment. But for now, if you look at the good medicine table on the player aid card, the threefold card, you'll see that you line up, basically, you cross-index the card that you're resolving, and it'll tell you the cost. And so card 41 means you remove 1 black cube from the raid pool first, then the recovery box, then the raided cubes box. What that means is if you have cubes scattered around, this is where they're going to come from. Well, the event put all the cubes back in the bag. So what you would basically do is take a black cube out of the bag and put it into the subjugation of the New Mexico box, and you would give the enemy +1 morale. It's also going to smack you again at the end of the game because it's going to impact your victory level negatively. So the later you do this in the game, the more expensive it becomes. And those black cubes being out of the bag it's a big deal. So I prefer not to do it unless it's really, really dire. There is a one flaw in the map when it says subjugation of New Mexico, collect +1 enemy AP per cube. What it really should say is +1 enemy AP per red cube. The black cubes do not impact enemies gaining of APs. It only impacts victory conditions at the end of the game, and it also impacts the fact that that cube's not there, and it messes up the math for when you're trying to raid New Mexico or kill outposts. Let's do a victory check segment, though, and work through this. We have a summary on the player aid card, but I'm actually just going to use the one in the rulebook because I've got that in front of me, and I won't have to swap screens here. So, step number 1, we subtract the VP value of the historical event card from the total VP value of all territories with one or more families. All right, so let's total up our VP value from our families, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit to make this a little bit easier. We have families in 3 territories, Shiprock, San Juan Valley, and Hopi Land, for a grand total of 4, 7, and 9. All right, total of 9 VPs. 4 for Shiprock, 3 for San Juan Valley, and 2 for Hopi Land. All right, now we subtract the VP value of the historic card from that total. So the card says 8 VP, and the difference is 1. If the difference is a positive number, you add 1 military point. So that's one thing that's going to happen to us that is good. So we do get 1 military point. Next, subtract the number of enemy morale from the number of military points and place the military point counter accordingly. Well, right now they're both co-equal, so that's going to send the military points down to 0. Don't be alarmed, it'll go back up, just not very much. All right, next you reduce the enemy morale to 0. The ideal is that you have a lot of military points when one of these things comes up and the enemy has a low number of morale, and you can really hurt the enemy. On the other hand, if the enemy had more morale than us, let's imagine for a moment that the enemy actually had 8 morale. Subtracting the 8 from the 7 would be a -1 value. Once the military points goes to 0, if you still have to subtract more military points, instead of subtracting them, you subtract culture points on a 2-for-1 basis. So if you have 0 military points and it tells you to subtract a military point, instead of losing a military point because you're already at 0, you lose 2 culture points. So that can drain you really, really quick. So we could have effectively, if we had like 1 military point and they had 8 morale, I mean, you can lose the game at this point. Because the next thing you need to do is check and see if you have 0 military and 0 culture points, the game ends and you suffer a major defeat. So let's imagine for a moment our military points was 2 and they had 8. Well, we would subtract 2. Bring us down there. We have 6 points we got to take care of, and that's going to cost us 12 culture points. That would wipe us out. We would lose the game. So that's just a warning to you. If you saw that was going to happen, that's why you would take good medicine, because that's bad, but it's better than losing the game at that point.
Hey Joel, at this point too, you might mention that each historical card, the victory points get larger and larger.
Yes, they do. They get increasingly larger. So you have to, and how do you cover more ground? Well, you have to get more families on board. Well, how do you do that? You do a passage of time operation is how you do that. And I'll show you one of those before we conclude here in just a moment. Okay, so step 4 is, because we didn't suffer major defeats, so step 4, increase military points by the number of man population counters in family boxes. That do not belong to families in the same areas or territories of forts. So we don't have forts, so we don't have to worry about that. But we only have 2 men in play, so we only go up 1, 2. And each time the military counter moves up on the track, the morale counter moves up on the track. Now the military counter will never pass 7 during a victory check segment. So if let's say that we started the segment and we were up here, because maybe the enemy had very low morale. Say they only had 1 morale, so we only dropped down from 7 to 6. Well, then we start adding, how many men we have. but we would stop at 7. Well, the military counter, because it drags the morale counter with it, if you're stopping at 7, that means the enemy's not going to have very high morale. In this case, however, boy, this is bad. Our military level is low. The enemy morale is low, but our military level is very low. So we're going to have to use our elders during the next few cards to maybe spend culture to gain military points or something. Okay, next, and just to make sure we're clear, let me read the rule again. If military points were at 7 or higher prior to the step, there's no effect. Each box that the military counter is advanced, the enemy morale counter is advanced 1 box. Remember, the military counter always stops at 7 during the segment, and therefore will not drag the military or the morale counter after that. The ideal is that enemy morale is at 0, and you have more than 7. You have 7 or more military points at this point. If that is the case, then the military counter will not move, and neither will the morale. The enemy will start with 0 morale. And if there is no missions on the board, you can win the game. But there's an outpost on the board, so that's not going to happen. All right, step 5, you add 1 enemy morale point for each outpost counter in play. So there is 1 outpost in play, so it goes up by 1. Remember, forts are not outposts. So once again, to make sure that it's clear, if we had 7 military points and morale was at 0 now, and there was no outpost on the board, you would win an instant victory. Difficult to arrange, but not unachievable by any means. I've won many times in the Spanish period by that mechanic. And because things can go so wrong so quickly, if you have the opportunity to go for an instant victory, go for it. Next, increase culture points by the number of women population counters in family boxes that do not belong to a family in the same territory as a fort. We have 3 women in play that qualify, but we can't advance past the 9 box during a victory check segment, so it stops there. Next, player is going to lose. Player's going to lose 1 culture point per fort in play. There is no forts in play, so we don't have to worry about that. And then lastly, step 8, unless resolving card 45 or 50, the player may, you don't have to do this, but you may spend culture or military points to buy 1 cultural development card. All right, so looking at the culture cards window, I can pick something out in here that I like. I'm going to take Wisdom of the Ancient Ones because I've got a feeling this would be needed later on. This allows me to, if a player has 1 or more culture points, during each planning operation, 1 attempt to convert a culture point into a military point succeeds without a die roll. That's going to be helpful later on, so let's hold on to that. I probably should have used Cunning to skip that first raid. If I was, playing the game myself and not doing a demo of game mechanics, I probably would have done that because then I wouldn't have to deal with the raiders at all. It would have allowed me to skip that instruction, just move right past it. All right, so that is that. Set the player's APs to 0. That's a real bummer. That's a bummer. And I'll return all cubes in rated cubes and recover box to raid pool. That's already been done by the event. Not all events will actually do that, by the way. Remove 1/2. This is the one that hurts. Remove 1/2 of all counters in the passage time box to the out of play box. So we're going to lose. We have 4 counters there. We're going to lose 2 of them. That is painful. And why that's painful will become evident in just a moment because I'm going to do a passage of time here in just a second just to show you how it works. All right, and that is the victory check segment, and this card, we don't discard it. We put it up here to remind us of that +1 enemy AP that the enemy is going to get on each card. And we go to the next card. It's a ceremony. Let's just... Whoops. Didn't mean to discard. Another ceremony. So you can see how ceremony cards can just really, really hurt you. What I'm going to do here, let's just draw this out here, and let's assume that it's our turn to do an operation, and I'll show you how a passage of time operation functions. So here we go. Passage of time. What does this do? The first thing it does is allows us to adjust our population. Any child counter in the population display and or passage of time box may be converted into an adult or elder. So this is where children become very, very valuable because you can convert them into any other population counter. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to use the 2 in passage of time box. I'm going to go ahead and discard them and turn them into a man and a woman. And I'm going to take the child from family B and the child from family C, and I'm going to convert them into a man and a woman. And I'm just going to really hope my elders don't die. All right, next thing, player may move any adult and child counters from the passage of time box to family box of any in-play family. All right, well, I think, you know what? I'm going to keep one of these children in play. I'm going to keep family C's child in play instead. I'll just convert just the one child from family B. Because then that'll allow me to take the man into family A. That way I have a man and a woman in family A. And I will then be able to go on, if I have culture points above 0, population counters in the passage of time box may be placed into the family box of an out-of-play family. And this is how you create a new family. And that's what I'm going to do with family D. So I'm going to create him. And you know what? I forgot to spend my culture point from buying that Wisdom of the Ancient Ones. When I did that, I should have spent 1 culture point. So sorry about that. Okay, so all those counters from passage of time, now they're in family boxes, and we created a new family, family D, and that allows us to put that counter into any area of the Canyon de Chelly at any ferocity value we want. We'll start them at 0. Actually, let's see. It actually says it's supposed to start with a ferocity of 0. I think we experimented with being able to put them in at any ferocity, and we found that most people put them in at 0 anyway, so we just wrote that into the rules. All right, next we go and adjust the culture points. -1 culture point for each empty population space in each family box of each in-play family. All right, so we have family A, family B, family D is each missing 1 population counter, so we lose 3 culture. Ideally, you want to create new families with all the population spaces filled, and this is why. And then we get +1 culture for each newly placed elder. I did not create a new elder during this time, so we're not going to get that bonus. So creating new elders does give you more culture. Okay, so remaining population counters in passage of time box are discarded to the out-of-play box. That almost never happens. All right, now we go to return animals. Any animals in family boxes go to the resources box. Same thing with passage of time. Anything in the passage of time box goes to the resources box. And now we breed animals. If you have at least 1 animal, you create another of that type. So we have at least 1 horse, so we get a new horse. And we have 2 sheep, so we get 1 more sheep. Okay, and next we harvest corn. So let's go ahead and flip him. Oh, that's perfect. It's the highest value corn, only the highest. That's absolutely amazing. All right. In each area of the family and a corn counter, player may harvest the corn. Place the harvested corn counters face up in the resources box. You do not have to harvest them if you don't want to at this time, but you do have to pre-designate before you take a peekaboo. All right, now we got to feed our people. So let's count all the population counters on the population boxes and elder display. We have 3 on the elder display, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Total of 12 people to feed. Next, we look at the arability of our territories that contain a family. Okay, this is why you don't want to crowd all you guys in 1 territory, because you get arability in each territory that contains a family. Dean, you may harvest corn as a family action when you are taking actions, but we're not taking actions. This is passage of time, and that is another way that you can harvest corn. You may ask, well, why wouldn't you want to harvest corn here? Well, perhaps you suspect a large enemy raid is going to come, and that corn can serve as speed bumps. That's one reason why you might not want to do that. But no, I'm looking at the passage of time procedure, and step 4 is harvest corn. And so that is another way that you can do that apart from the take actions operation. Does that make sense now? Bearing in mind that you can only plant corn during take actions, but you can harvest in either occasion. All right, so we got to feed 12 people. San Juan Valley does not have drought, nor does Shiprock, nor does Hopi Land or Canyon de Chelly. So all 4 territories is going to produce 3 food, and that is enough to feed everybody. So we actually didn't even need all those sheep. How about that? Unfortunately, all that corn is going to have to go away because corn counters in the resources box that are not spent are lost. You cannot save excess corn, so probably should have totaled all that up before I harvested it. Okay, now we go to feeding animals. Each territory can sustain 1 animal of each type. So because we have families in 4 territories, we could sustain a maximum of 4 horses and 4 sheep. We're well within that threshold, so we're okay there. Now the elder death check. We have to roll for each elder on the elder display, and if we roll within their elder rating, then they die. The rightmost elder, I will roll for him using my ceremony card. So I will discard that, and he will pass, because that's considered a 3. All right, and then the next guy's got a roll, and he rolls a 2, so of course he dies. And the next one rolls a 5, and he lives. So we kept 2 out of 3. I was really hoping to keep 3 out of 3. Now that's going to impact things negatively because, yeah, we got 4 families on the board, but with only 2 elders on the elder display, that means we can only activate 2 families plus 1 for that family in the Canyon de Chelly, so we're only going to be able to actually activate 3 of our 4 families. But it is getting late, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the demo at this point, and if anyone wants to ask any questions, I'll stick around and happily answer them. But hopefully I've given you a good enough overview of the game to help you figure out how to play, and maybe a little bit of strategy involved here too to show you how to play skillfully. It is a game that does reward good gameplay, and I haven't exactly exhibited a wealth of that tonight. In the interest of showing some mechanics, I have done some things that were not terribly wise, but this is one of those games where once you're bit, the next time around you're not going to let the enemy do that to you. So it is a game that rewards good gameplay, and that only comes through experience, really. So hopefully this will have helped you out.